The Republican National Convention coming to an end tonight in Milwaukee. Over the past 4 days, delegates heard from some of the party's top leaders, including the former president himself. Western Mass News reporter Maria Wilson joins us in studio after speaking with experts. Maria, what are they telling you?
Well, Abby, as you mentioned, Donald Trump formally accepting his party's nomination tonight in his first public speech since a gunman tried to assassinate him at a campaign rally just last week. Experts say while a lot could change between now and November, the Republican Party is finding themselves in a good spot.
This is a make or break moment for the United States.
Former President Donald Trump accepting the GOP presidential nomination just days after an attack on his life.
He survived an assassination attempt, not to make light of it. And then 48 hours left, later he rolls into his convention. So I think they've had a really good week so far.
That assassination attempt changing the tone of this week's convention.
I think they're trying to build a sense of unity, which is unusual. Usually it's, there's much more partisan. And then near the end, you try to develop unity.
For the past 4 days, delegates, lawmakers, and other party members heard Trump's agenda on the economy, foreign policy, and his vision for the country's future.
So they are positioning themselves as the friend of the working man.
This week, we also learned who would be filling out the Republican ticket.
I think from a purely strategic standpoint, it was a great move because, again, he is going to shore up those upper Midwestern states, the blue-collar folks.
All in all, experts say it was a successful week for Republicans.
Right now, Trump has the wind at his back.
The electoral map is now set up for the Republicans.
Meanwhile, top Democrats are pushing for the President Joe Biden to reconsider his election bid.
I think that from a purely electoral standpoint, the one who's best positioned to take the party forward would be Vice President Harris.
There's a mounting pressure happening now. I think the Democrats have already seeded the idea that they're probably going to lose the presidency, even if they change horses midstream. I think where they're really nervous is losing the House and the Senate.
But as Raven Sager told me, we're just going to have to wait and see how this will continue to unfold between now and election night. The Democratic National Convention is still a little more than a month away, where November's ballot will be solidified. In studio, Maria Wilson, Western Mass News.